Good afternoon and welcome to this talk of this third edition of the Smart City Week with David Weinberger and Renata Ávila, titled How to Improve Digital Inclusion in a Changing World. Smart City Week is a space for reflection and dialogue on the model of the city that we want. This third edition of Smart City Week, the program has more than 30 activities, most of them online and available on the YouTube channel of the Barcelona City Council. The leitmotif of this edition is the right to digital inclusion in order to guarantee access to the internet and digital technology, but also the abilities to take advantage of them. We encourage you to participate to the chat, exposing an idea or asking the speakers after their speeches. Renata will give room to David after these more speeches in order to explain your question. I'm introducing Renata Ávila. Renata is an international human rights lawyer and author, CEO of the Polylateral Association and the co-founder of the Alliance for Inclusive Algorithm, together with Women at the Table. Expert in a new next wave of technological challenges, it poses to social justice on trade, democracy, and society, fighting against digital colonialism. She advocates for the right to publish and defends whistleblower and journalists speaking through the power. Thank you very much, Renata, David, for staying with us. I give you the room. Thank you.
Thank you so much, and hello, Barcelona. I was last year with all of you in this Smart Week and Smart City Week, and this edition is going to be one that we will remember probably the rest of our lives, and one that is more reflective, one that is more, let's say, that is the opportunity to sit down and think through the decisions that will shape our digital future and the spaces around us to face the challenges that we have as a society ahead. It is my pleasure tonight, or today, depending on where you are connecting from, to introduce you to David Weinberger, he's a philosopher, and it's always good to have this date on a Tuesday with a philosopher. He's a pioneer and thought leader about the internet's effect on our lives, on our businesses, and most of all, on our ideas. He's very famous. He's the author of the Clue-Train Manifesto, who we will talk about it later in the conversation. But he has also contributed to, almost 4 decades in a range of fields, from marketing to politics to journalism, in publications such as Wired, Scientific American, or Harvard Business Review. He has been affiliated to the Harvard Berman Klein Center for Internet and Society. He was co-director of the Harvard Library Innovation Lab, and he was also writer in residence at Google AI Lab. So he was closer to the top of the top developments in technology. He was also a journalism fellow at Harvard Schornstein Center, and currently he's working at advising high-tech companies, presidential campaigns, and always passionate advocate for the open internet. He holds a doctorate in philosophy from the University of Toronto, and also an honorary Doctor of Letters from Simon's College. But now, with all this big bio, we will move to the questions. And the question is, the starting point is the past. And in the past 20 years ago, it's incredible how time flies. 20 years ago, when the internet was young and when the web was a baby, you wrote something that it was called the Clue-Train Manifesto. I assume that many of the people watching this are very young. And so first, I will ask you to tell us a little bit about this Clue-Train Manifesto. What was that about, and where can people find it online today to read it? And then, if you still stick to the arguments that it pushed forwards.
Hola, Barcelona. It's wonderful to meet you, Renata, and I hope this will be a conversation, not because I feel like I should be interviewing you about questions of inclusion. You've put in more thought and effort and know more about this than I do, for sure. Nevertheless, I will answer your question about ClueTrain. So ClueTrain started as a online manifesto in 1999 and was a book in 2000. It was written, both of those things are written by 4 of us. 4 now elderly white men, which is not incidental to what we're going to be talking about. We wrote it because it seemed to us that the press and newspapers, media, and businesses were not getting why people who had been on the web since mid-1990s were so excited about it. It was so important to us. And so more or less the point of the ClueTrain manifesto was that no, the internet is not primarily about publishing as it looked to the media, nor is it primarily about business. You can do both those things on the internet, of course, but it is primarily, the exciting thing about it is that it is a place where we, and that we goes back to being aging white men, but where the entire world, we thought, would be able to talk about what we, the big inclusive we, were interested in, not what we were being led to be interested in. And we could connect with others. It was fundamentally a social space. And that, I think, was the most important point of ClueTrain, which I think now, I think we were right about that. I think we were wrong about a whole bunch of stuff. Second, I think, big point of it was that this is really big. What's happening here is transformative, and not just of online reading and whatever. It was going to be transformative of virtually everything in our culture. And I think that has also, I think we were right about that. And the third thing maybe is, and this is fantastic, and it's clear we were not quite as right about that. But if you were early web people tended to be rather privileged because they, we were technically privileged. We tended to be economically privileged and the like. And so it seemed to be an equalizing site for the world. And it has become a site for the world, but I radically underestimated the influence of large corporations, maybe some inevitable effects of capitalism and other economies as well. And the difficulty of the world engaging in a global conversation, and also the just pure human weaknesses that we as humans never escape. And so it is obviously not the sort of utopia that many of us thought it would be and wished it would be. But I do think it's important also, especially in these days where almost all of the conversation is negative about the internet for the past 10 years, to remind people that the internet actually has had many really important transformative effects. And we could spend the rest of the time talking about that, but I think we probably don't want to spend the rest of the time on the forgotten good parts of the internet.
What I remember of those days, because when you were like probably connecting, I don't know, from Harvard, I was connecting from Guatemala. I come from Guatemala, and believe it or not, we had the internet as well. And this very basic, dial-up, hidden from my parents in my mother's computer, hidden from my parents, like trying to silence the sounds when it was connecting to the dial-up internet. And to me, and to many of us, and I was as privileged as you. I mean, I'm not a white male, but I had enough access back then when I was 18 to access the internet from my home and from my university. But it is very interesting how to realize that today, 2020, November, almost half of the world is still not connected. And it is, to me, it is on the one hand is scary to think on how divided we are on the experiences, the ways we talk, we interact, we decide, the information that we have access to take the decisions on a daily basis. But on the other hand, is also a space of opportunity and maybe a space of creating a new utopia as well. So do you think that we could create and we could create, is it too late, or we can still create an infrastructure that will enable us to have this global conversation? Or you know, we need to start something new from scratch? So.
Well, I am not sure. I think we should be trying to do both, because the problem of the digital divide, that haves and have-nots, is not simply a technological problem. It's a sort of, much of the world doesn't have water either. These are not simply technology problems. They are deeply human and very difficult problems because they cross all sorts of boundaries, including cultural and what counts as law and what counts as legal in various cultures. And these are really, really, really hard questions that to some extent we've been able to avoid because we had geographic distance, and we take away geographic distance and suddenly we are all in one another's faces, and we are obeying different laws, and we are obeying different norms, including norms as simple in a conversation as how long can one person talk before it becomes obnoxious? So I answered the first question at great length. Well, you know, moderate length. And that's, you know, I'm assuming a norm of conversation, but also a norm of interviews or whatever. Those norms are tremendous. We are so precisely tuned to what constitutes a good conversation, and when somebody is being obnoxious. They're talking too much, they're making too many jokes, are they not taking it seriously enough because their culture operates differently with their conversations? Are they cursing? Are they allowing themselves to be interrupted? The norms are so precisely calibrated that a global conversation simply on those grounds, forgetting the differences in culture and values and ideas, just at the simple level of engaging in a conversation, it's so difficult to do that. And we have thrown ourselves into this space without any preparation. And yet, so much goes wrong on the internet. Vulnerable people are targeted, in some ways horribly, ways that we wouldn't even, in some cases it's just horribly and systematically. And yet, most of us are on the internet generally because we're getting something really positive out of it, as well as the risks and dangers and threats that we encounter. We're on it because we do connect. And we may not connect with the world, but we can connect with more people. We're in touch with more people. We have access to information. We are able to build things together, all of this stuff. And so I think there's a sense in which we are having a global conversation, often quite successfully and often quite disastrously. And we are not prepared for having, conversation is always local, right? And we're not prepared to have a global conversation. We may get there or we may not. I don't know.
And especially if you consider that the design of a conversation, of what a good conversation is, of even the tone of the conversation is mostly designed in Silicon Valley or in China. You know, like if you take the two main producers of the platforms mediating our conversations. And I was thinking, like, just an anecdote, and I guess that many Spanish people will relate to me. Like there's some things you have online conversations and conference calls called Jitsi. And every time that someone from Latin American country or Spanish speaking or Italian speaking country speaks on this platform, it alerts us that it might be like a lot of noise in the background, and it's just us, because the way that we speak, like as you have seen, is like a little bit like high in tone and too overexcited maybe for the machine to understand that that's our culture. But on the normative and the locality, what I'm afraid actually is what I liked a lot of the early days of the internet, and what I'm missing a lot is these random encounters, because what I have observed, and I don't know if it's the AI interfering into this and like shaping our experience in a way that the system thinks that we want local as default, and that we want those similar from us, closer to us as the connecting points. And I would like to hear your opinion on the following. Like, the amazing thing of the internet that still exists is that I can connect right now with you who are on the other side of the planet, and I can connect from someone from Japan at the same time, and maybe discover something in Greece. And I don't know, like it's this exploratory nature. Both systems today, and there's a market logic behind it, of course, of locality, of local consumption, of labeling you, of putting you in a bucket. Yeah, first, it sends you back home by default. The browser, if you don't have like the system I have set up, sends you back home by default, sends you to your language by default. And when you have the experience with social media or even just buying things online, you are like sent back to this set of assumptions. And so are we losing with it, or are we gaining, or is a mix? And what do you think? Are we losing the experience of this randomness and this exploratory nature of the internet? And are we really benefiting? Is it really global when it is just so designed to be like to reinstate the geographies and even the walls of a condominium where we live in?
Fantastic question and thought. So just a minor point. When I say local, I'm using this, I should have explained this. I don't mean local geographically, although frequently it is the case. I mean local with a set of people with whom you share a set of assumptions and norms. And that can be across geographies, but you know, it also maps pretty well to a literal map frequently. So in the early 1990s, when the web came along, I'm sorry, I'm going to be an old man. Can't help it. When the web came along, the web was a protocol that Tim Berners-Lee donated to the world, right? Open, no patent, no copyright, nothing. Anybody can use it. And so we had an open protocol for connecting web pages. And as a result, we got a really robust open web, and we still have that. Now, it's not the center of attention in every case, although it's still a really important part of the internet and our experience of the internet. So we not me, but you know, the early web people, well, I will say all of us, we have this protocol, we built a web on a scale, a project on a scale of multiple, you know, like world wars or landing on Mars, and we did it without any manager, without any management system. There's nobody who managed the web, yet we managed to build the greatest network of human ideas, knowledge, bad ideas and lies too, in the history of our species. It didn't work that way when we were connecting people to people. Pages to pages, open protocols, people to people, Facebook. Somehow we let that protocol get owned by a private company. And that is a disaster. That is a disaster. And that is a place where we may want a new protocol. There's an obvious issue with starting up, as many new social networks have tried to start up to for people who are uncomfortable with Facebook, as I am. So it's, you know, there's the fact that everybody's on Facebook, right? So that's a problem for starting a new one. I've been told to try not to gesture because the virtual background is distracting as it eats my hands.
I mean, like you will see, like in 2 years' time, we will be with holograms. It's going to be like all different experience.
Yeah, well, I sort of also. But your point is, I mean, actually, that goes straight to your point, which is that if you want to make a system that allows the world to talk, you have to make decisions about what affordances, what features you're going to have. And if it's Zoom, you know, you're going to have boxes with people. Which people do you display? When do you display them? What sort of controls you give? All those sorts of things. And those absolutely, Zoom represents a particular idea of what a conversation should be. They had to make some decision, right? And they made apparently a pretty popular one. And likewise, Facebook had to make decisions about what its idea of a social network and friendship is. They do have a problem that it's so successful that there are thousands and thousands of messages competing to get into somebody's inbox. And if they really opened that up, then nobody would be there. So they have to make some decisions. As far as we can tell, they make decisions basically, fundamentally on revenue production and on the base, which means trying to get you to see as many ads as possible, to put it crudely. And that is a disaster for a global conversation. That is just a formula and a temptation for the worst sorts of behavior by a money-hungry global corporation that controls who gets to speak to whom and what. Remember that I said back in Clue Train days, we thought that one of the really important things about the web was that it enabled us to decide what we wanted to talk about, as opposed to the old broadcast media.
Yes.
And Facebook, on the one hand, it does have to have some level of control, because otherwise we'd just be awash in this sea. But the way that they are doing it and what we can tell about their motives is just not right. It's great for Facebook. It's not right for the world.
And it is interesting on the concepts of place and who we are, and like all the questions that like this pandemic really put the privilege us who had to stay like, like at home or at the closed office, isolated from people for a long time. I mean, it has been like almost a year. But I remember like on this Facebook thing, and I have this friend that you might know of. He was also a Shorenstein fellow, Hossein Darakhshan. He was 9 years in an Iranian prison. And when he went, and I met him before prison actually, and he was, in Iran promoting blogs, and he was like the hipster of Iran on internet issues. And he was one of the coolest persons there, promoting these kind of conversations, opening up Iran to the world, even having conversations with Israel. It was very interesting. But when he went out of prison, after, after 6 years offline, not 9, 6 years offline, he was like, oh my God, the web became the TV, even worse than the television. That was his statement. And he wrote a series of articles unpacking this, on how more and more we are not precisely what you said in the manifesto, and what you have like elaborated later, has become just this passive feeding us the information, passive thing feeding us certain amounts of with catastrophic consequences on politics, on literacy, and on even feelings, and even the experience that we have with the screens. So do you think that the pandemic affected it or changed fundamentally this situation? Do you think that we will see meaningful change happening soon, or do you think that it will be like just business as usual after it?
So first of all, I remember Hodor as his blogging name was from the mid 1990s. And yes, he was always a stalwart advocate for open web. Second of all, I don't entirely agree with you, Renata. You feel that the internet is failing in sort of serendipity of meeting new people, but I'm going to guess you know Hodor through the internet as I do. I'm an introvert. I'm a terrible, terrible introvert. I'm happy at home for the past 9 months. I'm not happy about the pandemic, but and I don't.
I'm the opposite.
Well, and so for me, the internet is actually, from the beginning, one of the reasons I liked it is it's actually a better environment for me. Most of my friends, I have so many more friends since the internet exists, but I know them only through the internet. I know so many more people and care about so many more people. So part of it may simply be personality differences, but likewise for information. First of all, I'm not on Facebook. I mean, I'm technically on Facebook, but I haven't been there in a couple of years and never. It's just not for me, and it's not for me primarily. I should say, take the high ground and say it's because of economics and politics and their bad influence, all of which I agree with. It's just not, it's not a comfortable way of engaging with people for me. I feel like I have to perfect every little comment that I make, and I have to think about how 100 different types of people will view it and will it make me look stupid or vain or whatever. It is a terrible place for somebody like me. Twitter, for whatever reason, I'm really comfortable with, and I'm not sure why, but it's a different sort of, it's a different set of affordances and has a different set of strengths. I find it to be a remarkable place, not only for meeting people and knowing people, but also for the serendipitous discovery of ideas and even for encountering contrary ideas. I mainly hang out with people I agree with because I'm a human being. And I also think that's how progress is made and how conversation is made and how knowledge forming occurs and people come to beliefs by hanging out primarily with people that they agree with about 99%. I think it's a very iterative movement for humans in conversation and in belief. Nevertheless, I encounter way more obnoxious ideas that I dislike, some of them dumb, many of them smart, now than I ever did. I think there's a true sense in which the internet sort of ripped the roofs over all of our rooms, and for the first time we can hear each other and we realize we really don't agree about things. Yes. That is a very disturbing recognition, but it's a really healthy one. Now, enabling racists to get together and band together and be more effective in the world is not a healthy thing. I'm going to go that far. But the terror that we face, that I think the internet is bringing us face to face with, is the fact of the world that we really don't agree, which is a problem for bringing people together in inclusive environments, by the way.
And it is a problem for the future. You know, some of the things is the core thing that keeps me up at night, apart from the large amount of coffee that I drink every day, like something to do with it. It is like,
for me, it's been Trump. That's what has kept me up, but please continue.
American, I mean, we had dealt with, you know, like corrupt oligarchs. I mean, we have a practice with it. Like we felt sorry for the US because it affects the rest of the world. But, you know, corrupt oligarchs, like we are well trained in Latin America. What my point, the point I wanted to make that makes me worried is all the data that we are producing, and even the data, you know, like all these gestures probably are being stored somewhere, and all the way that we personally are training the systems of the future, and from these conversations that we have online, the content we produce, all the data points that we produce every day is highly biased, and it's somehow. When I started seeing all this machine learning, AI, let's build a new world and let's make, like, you know, like accelerate the changes that we want to see in society, I was quite excited, you know, like I was like, oh my God, so we could have, like, you know, my dream was to reform public education and to make it, like, you know, see how all these automated systems could get us all more even at the knowledge layer. But it's not happening, obviously. It's instead training other systems. And these systems are being fundamentally more, I mean, we are reproducing patriarchy 2.0. For example, we are like developing very efficient mechanisms to kill people by drones. Like all the things that we dream of are not happening. And on the contrary, like the more jobless people, empty promises of progress that are only delivering to very few. How do you see this from the web to us producing massive amounts of data to train systems from the systems? How do you see that transition? And where is our agency there? Where is the utopia that we can dream of or affect somehow?
Okay, so I'm not going to promise a utopia. I hope that's okay.
Fair enough.
There's, and this is going to lead to a question for you. There is no doubt that machine learning almost always gets trained. It learns from data, right? You put the data in, you do a lot more work. There are many, many human decisions involved in training a machine learning system. But it is going to learn from the data that you choose to give it. And that data, if it reflects human society, which it generally does, you know, if it's astronomical data or if it's weather data, there are senses in which that reflects human society and needs, for sure. But it's not going to be probably as viciously biased as trying to train a system to decide who is a good teacher or what should be taught or who should get hired for a job, or the rest of very human sorts of decisions, or even how to plan a bus route in a city. It's going to reflect that the bias is machine learning's original sin. It's going to reflect the biases in the data that reflect the biases in the culture. There are, as you know better than I, many things that can be done in order to try to mitigate, to reduce the bias, to identify it and to reduce it or to compensate for it. And so there are instances in which machine learning systems actually have remained biased, but not as biased as humans performing the same job. And so I think we have to lower our expectations. These systems are not going to be unbiased. The question is, can we make them less biased than humans are? And I think in some instances we probably can. And where we can't, especially if they're coming up with more biased and with biased decisions that do not have recourse, there's no way to argue because it's coming from a black box. Coming from a black box. Yeah, that's a place where we probably don't want to use machine learning. So one of the big issues, as you know better than I, is that when instructing, it's just a machine, right? So somebody has to tell the machine what constitutes success, what sort of outcome you want that will constitute success. So in the case of autonomous vehicles, robot cars, I think almost everybody agrees, well, one marker of success is we want to train the models so that autonomous vehicles will result in dramatically fewer traffic deaths, right? If somebody wants to argue with me, I actually don't want to hear it. We want to do that. So that's easy. It's an easy one to decide on. It's the whole set of other ones that then gets extremely messy, such as, okay, we also want fuel savings for energy purposes. But we also want quick time to destination because humans want to save time. And we also want to have some degree of comfort because otherwise people won't get in the cars and so forth. And there are dozens of these things that you might want to train a system for, but you can't have all of them because life is imperfect. You can't have fastest time to distance, but also the least fuel consumed, probably. So we have to make these human decisions. It's just like city planning. Where are you going? How many crosswalks do you want? Okay, are you going to optimize for pedestrians or for cars or for something in between? Because every crosswalk is obviously going to slow down traffic. And that's like the simplest of cases. How many bus stops do you want? Does it matter to you how quickly people get to where they're going or how often the bus comes? And then if you can optimize it for one of those, but it's doing better in the rich parts of town than in the poor parts of town, is that going to be okay? And the answer to that's no. So my point is, in order to build a system, we have to make difficult value decisions. Those value decisions are very likely we're not going to be able to get all of them. We're going to have arguments about how the balance that we want in these, if we want to use machine learning at all. And that's one really, really important reason why machine learning projects need to be participatory. They need to bring in people who are affected directly and people who are affected indirectly. But Renata, how do you get a participatory machine learning system?
I would say, like one of the things, I don't like killing drones, but I love drone technology, and I will use it as an example. Unlike unlike Facebook, that you as a citizen have a very limited influence on how the things structure and what you can and cannot do with it. All your creative skills are restricted, basically. With a drone, you can do many things. You go to like a hobby shop, you buy the Raspberry Pi, you buy the key pieces, you can do a lot of crazy things. It's a very democratic technology. You see people in Africa repurposing it to irrigate fields. You see little kids in Europe playing experiments that make the police upset sometimes with the flying ones that they are homemade. But I think that with the machine learning, the thing that we have failed somehow to democratize the power that machine learning has. And it is not something yet that belongs to the people, that people can play with. That it's not just having a say on how the systems are shaped, because if you cannot participate in creating the systems of the future, you can have a very limited say on it. It is. I think that of course there are ways, and there's especially when those who are paying the bill of the automated systems are governments and local governments, like in Barcelona or in any other city. There's room for participation of multidisciplinary groups from the time you decide whether it's a good idea or not to the time that we evaluate the system, which is rarely done. But more than, I mean, it's important to take part in all this governance process, but what about how, I mean, I know that with biotechnology, it's already biohack labs, like it's participatory, like children can go, people without a degree can start like playing with it. But I don't know if you, maybe in Boston it's already happening, I don't know, if there's something that is low level entry that lets people play with, without being an engineer, without having a super powerful computer, play with the systems. And do we need to take a more active approach on including it in primary school curricula and getting the kids starting playing with their own data even?
So, I mean, there are sites these days, it seem to be more and more of them, which I think is a really good idea, that lower the hurdle, no or very little programming in order to build a machine learning system. I don't know at this point what sorts of practical things you can do with them, things that matter. But learning about how they work, understanding that they're probabilistic, understanding the ways in which data can lead us astray. And for me, maybe most important, understanding the extent to which these systems are able to pick up, to build, they don't start from big generalizations or big causal, different topic, with big generalizations about how some domain works. Rather, they start with the data, and they may never generate generalizations, but they can be better at making predictions. And that sense of a chaotically connected, incredibly complex network that has surprising and unpredictable results, I think is really sort of metaphysically important and a Copernican point in our evolution. But that's a different topic.
What I have seen, and with Black American communities in the US, I have a friend, Mutali is doing this initiative, AI for the People. And what they were doing for the election was to try to play with the systems by altering the patterns that the systems were trying to. Of course, misinformation and disinformation respond to stimulus. So the community observed what kind of reverse engineered the algorithm of Facebook promoting this hate speech and promoting suppression of votes, and started to play with it. I think that that's also a very radical way to start playing with the systems. If we spot a system of injustice, if they're trained with our behavior, maybe a way to hack it back to us is playing with the play that they have and generating a lot of chaos, as you pointed out.
I think that's actually a great example of the type of participatory machine learning. It's not coming in at the beginning in order to shape it, but it is playing with it to find what its mechanics are, how it's going right and going wrong. And that's actually, I think it's a wonderful example.
And then, I mean, I think that teenagers and young people are getting smarter and smarter about spotting this. I mean, I don't know, that one of the revelations of the pandemic was the first protest against the algorithm in the UK. I was quite gladly surprised when the students were unjustly scored by the UK system. I thought that I will never in my life see a young person, and not only one, like loads of them protesting the algorithm outside the. I mean, the connection that is power, and that is power that needs to be like democratized somehow, and there is power that needs to be held accountable, and that needs to respond for the consequences. It's very, very, very interesting. I think that we are heading to a period, a digital period, where the main stage will no longer be the star, will no longer be the internet and the web, but a new set of technologies. What do you think about that? Do you think that we are like moving slowly, like that it is like basically the web is now like the wired telephone for the young people, and that we are moving to the North is moving to other systems, interconnected systems, 5G and so on? Like, what's your impression? Or will it still be on a central stage?
So it's already an infrastructure. Infrastructures properly get ignored. People aren't aware of them all the time because you're not doing a dial-up modem as both of us did in the early days. It's just there. It's there everywhere. But that's generally good. There may be a change in the rise of interest in redistributing the internet interplanetary file system, and other such efforts are really interesting. I don't know what will happen. I've never predicted anything correctly, nor do I try. But I think that what you just said, I think in passing, is the key to it, which is it may not be the internet. I mean, who cares? It's just technology. It's just a set of protocols. But I think that it would surprise me if we moved away from what some people call generativity of the internet. That is the sense that we can make new things, and we can do this because we've built an interoperable infrastructure. That is, pieces from one can be picked up and from one system can be reused by another. Value can be added, that can be turned to something more niche in particular. And the means for doing complex things keep getting simpler and simpler. Right now, machine learning is hard. There are these sort of playground things. At some point, it may get easier. The fact that we are able to reuse the work of others, especially if we can get rid of some of the stupidest of the copyright laws for content, this is why we are living in an age that is overwhelmingly innovative, that is bursting with innovation, much of it bad, most of it irrelevant, and some of it fantastic. And we are doing it collaboratively. This is a future in which we are consistently not trying to narrow possibilities down to the one that we want, but one in which we are purposefully generating more and more and more possibilities in a shared and collaborative world. Terrible dangers, amazing infrastructure.
And on the stagnation of innovation, because it's something that obsessed me. When we came to this pandemic, we realized, many of the sectors that were artificially stopped by patent pools that were bought by Silicon Valley giants, like VR, for example, and other things that it should be like so useful now. To my surprise, for people in these big tech companies always preaching innovation, generativity, open internet, open everything, to realize how many small companies they eat, and entire sectors eaten by big tech that stop completely, and you cannot do any progress because you need the patents. If you were going to write I guess that manifesto of the future, of this chaotic generative future, I think that it's important to point at the main enemies of this future of possibilities. And I'm not saying like the perfect future, I'm not speaking about utopia, but what which are like the the blocks, who or what is blocking the possibilities of this future? Is it legislation? Is it taxation? Is it patents? Is it even architectural decisions that are very hard to reverse? Is it education inequality? Is it politics? Is it funding? I would like to know your opinion about that. Which blocks?
Yeah, I agree with all those. Unfortunately, it is all of those things. I happen to be, for whatever reason, because of my past training as a philosopher, I'm not a philosopher, by the way, but that's where my past training is. I'm sort of, for whatever reason, just like I'm an introvert, I'm most personally interested in the effect this has on, all of this has on ideas, but I don't think that the answer is going to come from another manifesto. Or I'm sure it's not going to come from another manifesto, and I'm doubly sure that manifesto is not going to be written by aging white men. For God's sake, no. Where my hopes are pinned is on a deep-held sense of the power of possibility, of openness, of interoperability, of open protocols. So trying to establish not only new technologies, but technologies that support open protocols, whether that's for technology or for knowledge or for all the different sorts of things that we've managed to lock up. Open protocols and interoperability open up the world and do so on their own without any inhibition. We need some inhibitions, but it's mainly, I think, fear and greed, but those are the same thing. It's fear that's holding us back. We're afraid of what happens if we acknowledge that the world is way bigger than our ability to control it, that most of what happens is accidental, that everybody wants to create and everybody gets some value out of it. I'm not sure that I'm going back to the internet, but I'm not sure that connectivity is a human right, that the internet is a human right. I sort of don't care whether, because I don't know enough, I guess, to whether it counts as a right, but I think it's something that we want everybody to have. So we should treat it as if it were a human right. We do want everybody connected. We want what they're connected to be more distributed, more locally controlled, as well as connected to the larger. That's and I think the second thing that we need, and I think I'm up to like 5 things we need for the utopia, is so many of the problems that we have on the internet are because of lack of education. We are not being educated in a way that enables us to come to belief together. At best, we're being educated in critical thinking skills, which tells us how not to believe things. And that's important. I used to teach that. I taught that for 5 years, twice a year. So I'm in favor of it, but it's not enough. We need to know how to come to belief. And as far as I can tell, there's not a tremendous amount of emphasis on that in educational systems now, because we're thrown into a world where there is every conceivable belief, and we cannot come to belief on our own, nor should we. We need to do it with other people, but we tend to be not very good at it. So I would love to see education as an important part of bridging the digital divide and getting us to the utopia that we need.
And for the last minutes and the last question, we will go back to Barcelona and to the city and to a space of possibilities. I don't know if you're familiar with, but many of the things that you mentioned, Barcelona is already doing and experimenting with open standards, with generativity and digital social innovation from the citizens to the city. And but if you could give one piece of advice to all these people behind all these crazy experiments going on in the city as a space of possibilities and digital possibilities, what would it be for the future, for the systems of the future?
Assume the world is more chaotic and less controllable than we think. And I don't mean I just mean in what happens in the course of ordinary day, and trust in people's ability to collaboratively create in fact encourage it by giving them the tools and the means and the encouragement and the education and the support and trust that they need. And hand over the reins to people who haven't had it. This is addressed to my fellow elderly white men. It's really, really time for that.
Thank you so much. And I hope that the next time that we see each other will be in Barcelona. This conversation in person, and you can see by yourself all the amazing things that, that the city is doing. And the good thing, and the good news is that many of the things, most of the things are open by default, free software, open standards, participatory. And I think that it's to me, like someone outside, it's very inspiring to see that in spite of all the austerity problems, chaos, and so on, there's people doing things and experimenting with things and taking risks. And I think that this is not a manifesto in words, but is a manifesto in actions, which I think that
That's exactly what I would look for. I love Barcelona. I've been very impressed by what Spain overall has been doing, and it's a model for the rest of us.
Well, thank you everybody for listening to us tonight or today, and thank you Barcelona for hosting us. It's always a pleasure to go back to you even virtually and to share thoughts and advance ideas.